Well, new inflation numbers show that consumer prices came in hotter than expected in September. The increase in the consumer price index was down slightly compared to August, but still, prices are 8.2% higher than they were last September. Fuel is up 18.2%, food 11.2%, and shelter 6.6%. Unfortunately for potential homebuyers, mortgage rates just keep climbing and are now at a 20-year high. The average rate sits just below 7%. They've more than doubled in the past year as the Fed pushes forward with its aggressive interest rate hikes. Well, some Americans will get some relief, though. The roughly 70 million Social Security recipients will see the largest cost of living increase in over 40 years. The average retiree will see their monthly payment rise by $146. For more, I want to bring in Kaj Larsen. He's a journalist and a former Navy SEAL. So, Kaj, we talked about Social Security recipients and cost of living increase for them. What about military? Inflation is hitting military families especially hard. The DoD adjusted its budget to a 3.9% inflation number, higher than the year before, but still falling way short of the inflation we've seen in 2022. Military pay just jumped 2.7% only. What kind of changes would you like to see going into the next fiscal year?
Well, Pamela, you described the economic climate and forecast precisely, and unfortunately this is disproportionately impacting our military families and our military service members. So that 2.7% pay raise you described, that's set by Congress in light of the latest CPI numbers, the latest inflation reports. Inflation seems to be really sticky around that 8.5%. That means effectively the military got a 6% pay cut this year. So you're seeing, once again, those that are asked to sacrifice the most are being compensated the least. And so I think it's really important that DoD steps up to the plate and does something about this. They've recognized it as a critical national security issue, and they've even gone so far as to do things like incentivize the commissary to lower food prices by 25% so that military families can afford food. This is a real crisis, and it's one that the DoD alone can't solve. So that's why we've kind of grabbed the Wall Street bull by the horns over at my company, Guild, and tried to focus on raising the financial health and literacy of the military community.
Yeah, I mean, it is just absurd to me. I mean, when I think about it, these are people serving our country, and so many of them they barely can pay their bills. They're experiencing food insecurity because of inflation. I mean, in 2020, even before this inflation, there was an analysis that showed 24% of active duty service members experience food insecurity. Inflation is only going to make this worse. I mean, tell us about what it's like when you talk to these military families. I mean, do you hear about families worried about where they're going to get their next meal?
Yeah, unfortunately, our military families, I mean, the nation is hurting, but our military families particularly are feeling these acute effects of inflation. Everything from food prices to, when you're describing the increase, the Fed rate hike in mortgage lending rates, that also disproportionately affects military families because they have to move every couple of years. So they carry these very burdensome, sometimes 30-year mortgages, right? And that can be an extra complicating factor for military families. So once again, across the board, the slope is slanted against the people who are on the front lines serving our nation.
And I think about how often they have to move, and then trying to sell a home and buy a new home or rent in this environment is really tough too. All right, I want to shift gears a bit here. There was an investigation that found that a 24-year-old Navy SEAL candidate died of bacterial pneumonia just hours after completing Hell Week. That's a particularly intensive part of the Navy SEALs basic training program. You have been through it, Kaj. That's where candidates rarely sleep. They are worked to exhaustion. They are exposed to high stress environments. The Navy added new medical checks and screenings in the wake of his death, but no actual changes to how Hell Week works. What do you think about this? Do you think the Navy needs to do more?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that I extend my sympathies to the Mullen family, which was the sailor who died that sparked a lot of this investigation that we're currently hearing about. Those of us in the military community, especially those of us in the Naval Special Warfare community understand what it's like to lose our brothers and to lose our loved ones. So my heart goes out to the family of Seaman Mullen. That being said, I think it's really important to, one, acknowledge that there have been specific changes made at BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, to address the specific circumstances of what happened in the case of this death that sparked all these investigations. But in the broader context, I think it's really important that the public understands that SEAL training is brutal and it's hard. It's the hardest military training in the world, and it probably has to be that way. And that's because we're asking these young men to undertake the hardest missions on the planet. You know, you can't raise baby tigers with milk alone. We have to simulate as close as we can, approximate as close as we can, the conditions of combat. And that's combat that starts from our heritage on the beaches of the Normandy all the way up to urban warfare in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that's an extremely difficult task, and we need to make training as challenging as possible while still being safe in order to prepare our men for that mission.
But what about potential abuse of drugs for these trainees trying to, performance enhancing drugs so that they get through Hell Week, this really, really tough week as they're trying to become a Navy SEAL? Do you think that's a problem? Should more be done to combat that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of headlines lately about performance enhancing drugs and potential drug abuse within the SEAL training pipeline and within the SEAL trainees there. And to be honest, I think this fundamentally misses the mark. This is a case of outsiders looking in. Hell Week is one of the hardest evolutions on the planet, but the mistake that people make is thinking that it's a physical evolution, the kind of physical evolution that would be enhanced by performance enhancing drugs, and that's fundamentally wrong. Hell Week and BUDS by extension is fundamentally a test of mental toughness, and there's no steroid in the world that can help you with that.
Yeah, that's a really important message. Kaj, really great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for all you're doing also to help our military families as well. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Pamela.